Welcome to Japanese Sleep Whispers, your sanctuary for peaceful nights and gentle dreams. Here, you will find calming bedtime stories inspired by the timeless beauty and traditions of Japan. Each story is read slowly in a soothing voice, accompanied by natural sounds such as flowing rivers and the tranquil rhythm of shishi-odoshi. Whether you seek relaxation, relief from stress, or help falling asleep, these tales invite you to drift away into a world of serenity. Imagine quiet temples, moonlit gardens, and the whispering bamboo forests as you listen. If you'd like these soothing stories to be part of your nightly routine, consider subscribing so they're always with you when you need them. Subscribe and let these stories be your nightly ritual of calm and rest. Thank you for being here. May you always find peace in every moment. Midnight Train Through Kyoto. Prologue. The whisper of lantern light. Beneath the silent veil of midnight, Kyoto slept. The wooden eaves of old machiya houses leaned toward one another like old friends. Whispering secrets, their tiled roofs gleamed faintly beneath a pale, wandering moon. A river murmured somewhere in the distance, its voice low and ancient. The sound of wind in the bamboo groves moved like slow breathing, a rhythm the city had known since time forgot. And then, from somewhere beyond the world of waking, came the sound of a bell. It was not a temple bell. Nor was it the clatter of carriage wheels or the cry of a night heron. It was a softer sound, almost shy, like the echo of something that had existed only in dreams. The people of the city did not stir. Their dreams were deep and hushed. But for those who lingered on the border of sleep, for those whose hearts still remembered stories, the sound was clear. A hum of unseen rails beneath the earth. A sigh of steam. The faint chime of a conductor's lantern swinging gently in the dark. There was no train in Edo, Kyoto, not yet, not for centuries to come. And yet, on nights when the air was heavy with the scent of rain and plum blossoms, some claimed they saw it, a long, silver silhouette gliding through mist. No wheels, no smoke, no sound of iron. Only a soft glow that shimmered along the streets and vanished before the first rooster crowed. They called it the midnight train. And no one could say where it came from, nor where it went. The story begins with a man, or perhaps only the dream of a man, standing on the edge of the Kamo River. His name was Ren, a poet by trade, a wanderer by habit. He was neither young nor old, but somewhere between memory and forgetting. His robes were worn but clean, his sandals dusted with the powder of long roads. In his hand, he carried a small paper lantern painted with a single character Yuna dream. Ren did not know why he had come to the river that night. Perhaps it was the faint sound that had called him. Perhaps it was the moon, too bright to ignore. Or perhaps it was that peculiar loneliness that descends only when the world is too beautiful to bear awake. He stood upon the river bank, watching the water curl around stones smoothed by centuries of flow. The air smelled of ink and rain and faint smoke from a distant hearth. And then he saw it a shimmer, like moonlight catching glass. From the far side of the river, where the mists thickened, lanterns began to bloom one by one. They floated in silence, dozens, then hundreds, their light reflected in the water below. But they were not held by hands. They hung in the air as if strung upon invisible threads, and the wind did not touch them. Ren stepped closer. The water did not ripple at his feet. The night did not breathe. He blinked once, and where the lanterns had been, there now stretched a railway, faint and glowing, as if woven from moonlight and silver rain. The river had become a path. And upon that path, the midnight train was waiting. It was long, impossibly long. The carriages shimmered like glass, reflecting temples, bridges, and the thousand quiet lives of the sleeping city. Paper windows breathed faintly with inner light, painted in soft amber tones. At the front, a single lantern burned white and cold, its flame steady against the night. Ren felt no fear, only a stillness, deep and profound, like standing inside a poem before it is written. When the first carriage door slid open without a sound, he stepped forward. Inside, the air smelled of sandalwood and distant rain. Tatami mats lined the floor. The lamps within were shaped like lotus blossoms. Shadows of maple leaves drifted across the walls, though there were no trees nearby. Somewhere, a koto played a single note and then fell silent. Ren found an empty seat beside a window and placed his lantern beside him. Its flame flickered once, as if bowing to the light of the train. No one else was aboard. Or so he thought. As the train began to move smoothly, without a tremor, he saw reflections shifting in the glass. Faces, faint as mist, watching the night pass. They were not ghosts of malice, but of memory. A woman holding a parasol beneath plum blossoms. A child chasing fireflies through summer air, an old man lighting incense before dawn. They gazed not at Ren, but through him, as if he were part of their dream. The train glided past the streets of Kyoto, but not as they were. The city beyond the windows shimmered in two worlds at once. Tiled roofs dissolved into clouds. Bridges became ribbons of light, and temples floated upon the air like petals. Bells rang from invisible towers. Time slowed until it was no more than a hush. Ren reached out to touch the window. His hand met not glass, but cool water. Ripples spread outward, and for an instant he saw his own reflection or someone very much like him, dressed in different robes, holding the same lantern. He whispered, "Am I dreaming?" And from somewhere, deep within the hum of the train, came a voice. Soft as silk, ancient as stone. All who ride beneath the lantern moon dream. All who dream, arrive. The words folded into the rhythm of the train, like wind joining the sea. Ren closed his eyes. Outside, the bamboo groves leaned closer. The wind whispered through them 1,000 leaves brushing against one another like the turning of forgotten pages. The train moved onward, deeper into the mist. Ren did not know where it would take him. But as the sound of the wheels or the illusion of them grew softer, he felt his thoughts dissolve like ink in water. He was no longer a poet, nor a wanderer. He was simply a dream traveling through Kyoto's heart, beneath the silent gaze of lantern light. And somewhere, in the distance, a fox cried once, long and low, as if mourning something that had never truly existed. The train did not stop. The city did not wake. And the night, wrapped in its own quiet music, continued forever, a breath between this world and the next. The lanterns dimmed. The air fell still. The dream began. Chapter 1: The Silent Station of Dreams. The train slowed without a sound. There was no whistle, no grinding of wheels, only the faint hum of the lanterns swaying in rhythm with the unseen rails. Ren opened his eyes. At first, he thought the light outside had changed. Then he realized the train had stopped. Mist pressed softly against the windows, pale and luminous, like breath on glass. Shapes moved within its silhouettes of trees, perhaps, or the suggestion of a torii gate half buried in the clouds. Ren stood, his footsteps silent upon the tatami floor. His lantern still glowed faintly by his side, though he could not tell whether it was by its own will or his. He stepped toward the door. It slid open before he touched it. Outside, the world was quiet. Not the silence of sleep, but something deeper, the kind of silence that listens. Lanterns hung from invisible strings in the air, forming a soft curve of light that stretched into the fog. Beneath them lay a station unlike any he had ever seen. No platform, no rails, only smooth, dark water reflecting the sky above. The station seemed to float upon it, built from old wood polished by time. Faded banners hung from its beams, each painted with a single word in calligraphy: Meng Dream, Jing silence, Gui return. Ren stepped onto the platform. His sandals made no sound, as if the air itself was holding its breath. He turned, but behind him, the train had vanished. Only a faint shimmer of light remained where it had been, dissolving like frost beneath sunlight. For the first time, Ren felt a tremor in his heart. Was he meant to disembark? Or had he wandered into something that did not wish to be found? A soft voice answered his unspoken thought. "You have arrived." Ren turned sharply. Standing at the far end of the platform was a woman dressed in white. Her kimono flowed like mist, unmarked by dust or time. Her hair, long and dark as river water, moved as if stirred by an unseen current. In her hands, she carried a fan made of thin silver leaves that shimmered with every breath she took. "Arrived where?" Ren asked. The woman smiled faintly. "At the first station. The place between waking and remembrance." She began to walk toward him, her feet never touching the ground. Few travelers step off the train. Fewer still remember that they did. Her voice was calm, yet it carried the weight of distance as though it had traveled across centuries to reach him. Ren bowed politely. "Then, may I know your name?" "I have had many," she said. "Once, they called me Shizuka, for I am the keeper of silence. My duty is to tend the echoes left behind by those who dream too loudly." Ren frowned gently. "Dreams can be loud?" "Indeed," she said. "When hearts cry for what cannot return, their dreams shake the stillness of the world. It is I who quiets them, so that the dream may go on." Shizuka gestured toward the edge of the platform. Ren followed her gaze and saw, just beyond the mist, faint ripples spreading across the water. In their depths, reflections of the waking world flickered streets of Kyoto by daylight, merchants calling out, children chasing shadows of kites. "Those are memories," she said. "Yours, perhaps. Or another's. They drift here, waiting to fade." Ren knelt beside the water. The surface shimmered with familiar scenes: his old house by the temple, the ink stains on his fingers, the face of a woman smiling beneath spring rain. He reached toward her image. The water darkened, swallowing it whole. Shizuka closed her fan. "You cannot touch what you have already dreamed." Ren stood slowly. "Then why show me? So you may learn to let go," she said. "All travelers must lighten their hearts before the train may cross the night completely." Her words lingered like incense smoke. Ren looked up at the lanterns above. They swayed slightly, casting patterns upon the mist. "And when the heart is lightened?" he asked. "Then the train will come again," Shizuka said. "It always does." For a while, neither spoke. The silence between them deepened until even Ren's thoughts seemed to grow still. In that stillness, he began to hear other sounds, faint, delicate, almost forgotten. The rustle of paper sliding across a writing desk. The distant echo of a bell. The whisper of wind through pines. They were not sounds of the present, but of moments half-lived, half-remembered. He realized then that the station was not a place, but a gathering of memories, a harbor where lost sounds rested before vanishing into sleep. Ren turned to Shizuka once more. "Do you remain here forever?" She smiled, and for a moment her eyes reflected the pale glow of the lanterns. "Forever is only the dream of time," she said. "When the last whisper fades, I too shall dissolve. And until then, I listen." Ren bowed again, deeply this time. Then, "Lady of Silence," he said softly, "may I leave something here for you to keep?" Shizuka inclined her head. "If it is light enough." Ren untied the cord around his wrist and drew forth a small, folded paper, a poem he had written years ago and never shown to anyone. Its ink was faded, its words simple. He opened it and read aloud, his voice trembling like the flame of his lantern. "When night forgets its own reflection, let me be the river that remembers." When he finished, he placed the poem upon the water. It floated there for a moment, then sank, leaving no ripple behind. Shizuka bowed her head. "It is lighter now." Ren felt it too, a soft emptiness, not of loss, but of release. Somewhere beyond the mist, a bell chimed once, clear and distant. The lanterns above flickered, and the faint hum of rails returned, like the pulse of a sleeping heart. Shizuka stepped back, her outline growing translucent. "The train awaits you," she said. "Do not look for me again. You will not find me twice." Ren wanted to thank her, but his words caught in the quiet. By the time he blinked, she was gone, dissolved into the stillness she kept. He turned. The train was waiting once more, its doors open, its light soft and patient. Ren stepped aboard. The door closed, and the world outside fell away. As the train moved forward, the mist behind him folded into darkness. He looked out the window one last time. The station was gone, but upon the glass, faint as breath, remained a single word written in dew. Jing. Silence. Ren smiled, and the train glided onward, deeper into the dream. Chapter 2: The River and the Willow Maiden. The train moved again, softly as breath. Through the window, the mist began to thin, and Kyoto revealed itself not as it was, but as it dreamed of being. The Kamo River gleamed like liquid silver beneath the lantern moon. Willows bowed along their banks, their long green hair trailing into the current. The air shimmered with a faint blue light, and the scent of rain drifted in, clean and ancient. Ren leaned closer to the window. For a moment, he thought he saw lanterns floating upon the water. But as his eyes adjusted, he realized they were not lanterns at all. They were blossoms, pale and translucent, drifting without stems or shadows. They pulsed faintly with inner light, like memories that refused to die. The train slowed. Ren felt the rhythm of its motion ease into stillness. The door slid open once more, though he had not touched it. Beyond it lay the river bank. He stepped down. The air was cool and soft, like the inside of a shell. The ground beneath his feet shimmered faintly, neither water nor earth, as if made from the reflection of both. The willows swayed in slow rhythm, their branches whispering in a language too old for words. Ren followed the sound until he reached a bend in the river. There, beneath the largest willow, stood a woman. Her robe was woven from moonlight and green shadow. Her hair hung long, touching the water. When she moved, the river moved with her, and the ripples at her feet glowed with faint gold. Ren knew, without knowing how, that she was not human. "Traveler," she said, her voice like rain falling on distant tiles, "why do you walk beside my river?" Ren bowed. "I follow a train that moves through dreams. It brought me here, though I do not know why." The woman smiled faintly. "Dreams do not explain themselves. They flow, as rivers do." She turned her gaze toward the current, her eyes luminous and deep. "I am called Yanagi, the Willow Maiden. I keep the river's memory. Every drop that passes remembers what it once touched, a tear, a prayer, a farewell. I listen to them all." Ren stepped closer. "The river remembers everything? Everything that we forget," she said. "Every promise broken in silence. Every name whispered and then lost. The river carries them until the sea forgives them." Her words drifted like petals on the current. Ren felt something within him stir, a memory of standing by this same river long ago, with someone whose face he could not quite recall. He had been younger, laughing softly as willows swayed above them. But the laughter faded, and only the sound of water remained. Yanagi watched him quietly. "You have left much behind, haven't you?" Ren nodded. "Too much. And yet, I remember enough to ache." She smiled with sadness. "Pain is the shadow of remembrance. Without it, the heart would vanish." Ren sat upon the grass beside her. The train was gone now, or perhaps it had never existed here. Only the river flowed, unending and calm. "Lady Yanagi," he said softly, "tell me, do you ever wish to stop flowing?" The willow branches above them stirred, though there was no wind. She looked up toward the moon. Once, long ago, I'd tried. I held the river still with my roots, so I could keep the reflections that I loved most, the faces that smiled upon me, the moon that lingered in my leaves. But the still water grew heavy. It turned into a mirror and forgot how to sing. And the faces faded anyway. Her hand brushed the surface of the river. Ripples spread outward, carrying the reflection of her face into the distance. So I learned to let go, she said. To flow is not to lose. It is to give every memory a place to rest. Ren listened. The words fell upon him like soft rain, soaking into the silence within his chest. He looked into the water. The ripples began to change, forming shapes, moments, images. He saw himself as a boy, sitting beneath a willow tree, writing his first poem. He saw the woman from his past, her laughter bright as wind chimes. He saw her illness, her fading smile, her absence. Unagi's voice came again, almost a whisper. The river remembers her, too. Would you like to see? Ren nodded. The current slowed, and the water became clear. There she was, the woman he had loved, standing on the opposite bank. She looked just as she had before the illness took her eyes calm, her hair falling over her shoulder. She smiled at him, not with longing, but with peace. Ren reached out. The reflection shimmered, then broke apart into countless petals of light. Unagi closed her eyes. She has flown beyond dreams. You must do the same. Silence settled between them again. The willows whispered above. Ren realized he was crying not with sorrow, but with release. Each tear that fell into the river glowed briefly, then joined the current. Unagi smiled gently. See? The river accepts all offerings. Ren bowed deeply. Thank you, Lady of the Willows. She inclined her head. Your gratitude belongs to the water. It is older than both of us. Then, almost to herself, she murmured, when the last willow falls, the river will forget even its own name. Until then, I remain. Her form began to fade, her body dissolving into strands of green light. Ren reached forward, but she was already gone, her hair becoming the willow leaves, her voice becoming the sigh of the current. Only the faintest echo of her words lingered in the airflow, traveler. Flow and be forgiven. The lantern on Ren's belt flickered once. Far away, the soft hum of the train returned, calling him back. He rose, feeling lighter than before, his heart no longer bound by the weight of unsaid words. As he turned, he saw the river bend behind him, and for a heartbeat, the reflection of the willow maiden smiled from the water, her eyes bright with eternal calm. Ren stepped toward the mist. The train waited, silent and patient as always. He boarded, and as the doors closed, he glanced back one last time. The river shimmered, and in the ripples he read a single line of moonlight script. All who remember must learn to flow. Ren whispered it to himself as the train began to move, and the rhythm of its unseen wheels became the rhythm of his breath. The lanterns swayed, the night deepened, and the dream carried him onward, to the next station beyond the stars. Chapter 3: The Tea House Beneath the Stars. The night unfolded like silk. Ren sat once more within the train, its lanterns glowing dimly as the world beyond the windows changed shape again. Kyoto dissolved into starlight. Temples, rivers, bridges all became points of light drifting upward, until only the dark velvet of the sky remained. The train was now gliding through the heavens, as if the stars themselves had become its rails. Ren closed his eyes. The rhythm beneath his feet felt slower now, gentler, like the pulse of sleep itself. And then, without a word, the train came to rest. The door opened. Ren stepped out, expecting mist or forest, perhaps another river. Instead, he found himself standing before a small tea house, floating in the middle of a sea of stars. Its walls were made of bamboo and pale paper screens that shimmered faintly, reflecting constellations like gold dust. A red curtain fluttered in a breeze that did not exist. A wooden sign hung above the entrance. Its characters were brushed in soft, uneven strokes. Hoshino-chaya, the tea house beneath the stars. Ren hesitated. A tea house. Here? A voice from within answered, gentle and amused. Dreams grow thirsty, too. Won't you come in? He stepped through the curtain. Inside, everything was warm and golden. A small hearth glowed at the center, its smoke rising into a ceiling that opened into infinity. Stars hung like lanterns overhead, close enough to touch. A woman in a crimson kimono knelt beside the hearth, tending a pot that sang quietly with the sound of boiling water. Her hair was silver, her eyes deep and kind. "Welcome, traveler," she said. "You have come far through silence and memory. Sit, rest." Ren bowed and knelt across from her. "May I know your name, my lady?" She smiled. "Names come and go like steam. But you may call me Akari." "Light," Ren murmured. She nodded. "It is what remains when everything else forgets itself." Akari poured tea into 2 porcelain cups. The liquid shimmered like molten amber. When Ren lifted his cup, a faint fragrance rose: jasmine, plum, and something older, like rain that had never touched the earth. As he drank, warmth spread through him, slow and steady. He felt his mind soften, his body dissolve into calm. Then he noticed they were not alone. Around the tea house, other figures sat in silence, some visible, some merely impressions of light. An old man gazing at his hands as if remembering how to hold a brush. A child chasing fireflies that glowed softly above the tatami. A young woman humming a lullaby without sound. They did not seem to see him. They were shadows of those who had once lived, gathered here for one final cup before fading into the stars. Akari followed his gaze. "Do not be afraid," she said. "They come here to rest, not to haunt, but to forget." "Forget?" Ren asked softly. She nodded. "Dreams are heavy things. They cling even to the dead. Here, they lay them down." Ren watched as the old man before him lifted his tea, his hand trembling. When he drank, his form began to dissolve into light, his brush-stained fingers fading first. Then his face, until only the cup remained, shining faintly before vanishing too. Akari smiled. One less weight in the sky. Ren set down his own cup. "And if I drink?" She studied him with gentle eyes. "You are not yet ready to dissolve. But perhaps, you are ready to remember what must be forgotten." She reached beneath the table and drew out a second pot, smaller, black as night. "This tea," she said, "is brewed from starlight and longing. It shows the drinker what lingers still." Ren hesitated. "And if what lingers cannot be let go, then it will follow you," she said simply. "Until you are light enough to vanish." Ren took the cup. The liquid inside was clear as glass. He raised it to his lips and drank. For a moment, there was only silence. Then, the stars around him began to move. They swirled like a great slow river, forming images, scenes drawn from his memory and beyond it. He saw his father, silent beneath a lantern, writing by candlelight. He saw his mother's hands, weaving threads of red silk that glowed in the dimness. He saw the woman by the river once more smiling, waving, vanishing. Then, he saw himself, sitting beside an empty desk, staring at a blank sheet of paper that would never hold another poem. He felt the ache rise again, but this time, it was soft, not sharp. It was the ache of understanding. Akari's voice drifted across the starlit air. "Pain, too, can be a lantern, if you learn to carry it gently." Ren closed his eyes. "And when the lantern burns out, then," she said, "you'll know you've arrived." When he opened his eyes again, the other guests had gone. The tea house was almost empty, save for Akari and the faint shimmer of the stars outside. She poured one last cup and placed it before him. "Take this with you," she said. "When the night feels too long, remember its warmth." Ren bowed deeply. "Will I see you again?" Her smile was quiet, endless. "You already have," she said. "In every dream where you felt at peace." Her form flickered, her silver hair dissolving into threads of starlight. The tea house began to fade, its walls turning transparent, its lanterns drifting upward to rejoin the sky. Ren found himself standing once more upon the train platform, the cup of tea still warm in his hands. The train waited, patient as always. He boarded, and as he sat, he raised the cup to his lips once more. The tea was cool now, but its taste remained a reminder of stillness, of warmth shared among the stars. As the train began to move, the night outside unfolded again, and Ren whispered to the silence. "All warmth must fade, but even fading light still knows how to shine." The train hummed in reply, and the stars outside seemed to bow as he passed. Chapter 4: The Fox and the Moonlit Bridge. The train's motion softened into stillness once more. Ren opened his eyes to find the world drenched in silver light. Beyond the window stretched a bridge, long, narrow, and gleaming red beneath the full moon. It rose from a sea of mist, reaching toward nothing visible, fading into the horizon like a thought half remembered. At its entrance hung a single lantern, glowing pale white. A fox's mask dangled beneath it, swaying gently, though there was no wind. Ren felt something stir within him, a quiet knowing, the sense that this place had been waiting for him. The door slid open. He stepped out. The air was cold, yet not unfriendly. Mist curled around the wooden planks of the bridge, each footstep echoing like distant bells. The moon above hung enormous and still, reflected perfectly in the sea below, or was it the sky? It was impossible to tell. Halfway across the bridge, Ren paused. The silence was too complete, too perfect, the kind that only exists before something begins. And then he heard a low, soft laugh. Not cruel, not kind, just knowing. From the far side of the bridge, a figure approached, slow, deliberate, graceful. At first, Ren thought it was a woman. Then the light shifted, and he saw the tail white as snow, trailing behind her like a ribbon of smoke. Her kimono shimmered between colors, red and ivory, as though the fabric could not decide which dream to belong to. Her eyes gleamed golden, their pupils thin and sharp. And yet, there was warmth there, a mischievous tenderness. "You've come far, poet," she said, her voice smooth as sake. "Few walk this bridge and return." Ren bowed slightly. "And fewer, I suspect, know they're walking it." The fox smiled, revealing a flash of teeth. Ah, so you remember your own dreaming. They stood facing each other beneath the moon. Ren noticed how her shadow did not move as his did. It flowed across the bridge like liquid, separate from her form. "Who are you?" he asked. The fox tilted her head. "Names are masks. Tonight, you may call me Kitsune. I am the keeper of truths, too bright to see by daylight." Ren looked out over the endless mist. "Then perhaps I should keep my eyes closed." Kitsune laughed softly. "Wise but futile. The truth finds us whether we seek it or not." She stepped closer, circling him slowly. Her movements were silent, her tail brushing against the air like falling snow. "You carry many masks yourself," she said. "The poet who fled his own words. The lover who clings to ghosts. The man who rides a train that doesn't exist." Ren's heart trembled. If they are masks, what lies beneath them? "Nothing," she said simply. "Or everything. It depends on how brave you are." She stopped before him, and her golden eyes softened. "Would you like to see yourself without the dream?" Ren hesitated. The air thickened around them, the mist turning glassy. At last, he nodded. Kitsune reached out, touching his forehead with one cool fingertip. The world dissolved. Ren found himself standing once more in Kyoto, but not the dream Kyoto. This was the city as it had been in his waking life, alive with merchants, laughter, the scent of soy and smoke. The sun was setting, the river glowed amber, and the bells of the temple called the evening hour. He saw himself walking through the crowd, unseen, unchanged. His younger self carrying the same lantern, his face full of quiet ambition. He followed, unseen, until the path led to a small bridge over the Kamo River. There, his younger self paused. A woman stood waiting on the other side. She smiled, and he smiled back. The air between them shimmered with words unsaid. Ren's breath caught. He remembered this moment the night he had promised her he would return. The night he never did. The dream trembled. The fox's voice returned, though her form was nowhere to be seen. Dreams remember even the promises the heart has forgotten. Ren watched as his younger self crossed the bridge, only for the scene to fracture, the woman's smile fading, her form dissolving into rain. The city blurred, the colors bleeding away until only the bridge remained red, silent, endless beneath the moon once more. Kitsune appeared beside him again, her expression neither pity nor judgment. "She waited," Ren said softly. "And I did not." Kitsune nodded. "We all leave someone waiting somewhere. That is the nature of being alive." Her eyes shone. "But to remember, even in dreams, that is the beginning of forgiveness." Ren turned to her. "Forgiveness for whom?" "For yourself," she said. "Who else carries your heart?" The moonlight grew brighter, washing everything in white. Kitsune's shape began to shimmer, her outline blurring into light. Ren stepped closer. "Will I see you again?" She smiled faintly. "Every time you question what is real, I will be there." Foxes walk the borders of truth. She lifted her hand, tracing a circle in the air. It shimmered, opening like a doorway of light. "Your train waits," she said. "But remember, poet, when you cross a bridge, it crosses you too." Ren bowed deeply. "And if I do not return?" Her voice drifted like wind through leaves. "Then perhaps you never left." He stepped through the circle. The light folded inward, and once again he stood upon the train. It moved slowly now, gliding through a sea of moonlight. Outside, the red bridge stretched behind him, endless and still. On the window's surface, he caught a final reflection, the faint image of a fox, her tail curled, her golden eyes watching with quiet joy. Ren touched the glass, and for a heartbeat, the warmth of her presence lingered beneath his palm. Then it was gone. The moon hung above, full and unbroken. And Ren whispered into the hum of the train, "Truth is not light. It is the shadow that teaches light how to shine." The train carried him onward, its lanterns swaying gently like stars that had chosen to wander. Chapter 5: The Painter of Forgotten Roads. The train moved like a sigh through the darkness. Its rhythm was slower now, not the urgency of travel, but the breathing of rest. Ren sat alone in his carriage. The paper lantern above his seat swayed softly, casting circles of amber light that trembled like memory. He could hear the faint sound of ink on paper, scratch, whisper, scratch coming from somewhere down the corridor. Curious, he rose and followed it. The sound led him to the final carriage, one he did not remember entering before. When he slid the door open, he found a small room filled with paintings. Dozens of scrolls lined the walls, unfurled and fluttering slightly as if stirred by an unseen breeze. Each painting glowed faintly in the dim light, images of streets, bridges, temples, and rivers, all rendered in delicate brush strokes. And at the center of them sat an old man, hunched slightly, a brush poised in his hand. His hair was white as frost, his robe ink-stained, his eyes calm as still water. He looked up when Ren entered, his smile gentle and without surprise. "Ah," he said, "another traveler between dreams." Ren bowed politely. "I didn't mean to intrude." "Nonsense," said the old man, motioning for him to come closer. "Dreams welcome all who remember to knock." Ren stepped forward. The scent of ink and sandalwood filled the air. He looked around, entranced by the paintings. One showed a narrow alley lined with paper lanterns, another a pagoda reflected in the rain. But the details were shifting. The lanterns flickered in patterns that changed as he watched. The river moved, flowing from one scroll into another. "These Ren murmured. They're alive." The painter chuckled, as all memories are, until we stop believing in them. Ren turned to him. "Are these your works?" The old man dipped his brush into a shallow bowl of water that gleamed like mercury. "Mine, and not mine. I only paint what the night remembers." Ren watched in silence as the man's brush danced across a blank scroll. Each stroke was deliberate, effortless, as though the brush itself knew the way. Within moments, a scene appeared: a quiet Kyoto street under falling snow. The old man's voice was low, almost a whisper. "When I was young, I tried to paint the world as it was. Every lantern, every stepstone, every reflection." He paused. "But the more I painted, the more I realized the world never stands still long enough to be caught." Ren nodded slowly. "So you paint what you remember instead?" The old man smiled faintly. "Not quite. I paint what reminds me." Ren frowned gently. "What do you mean?" The painter rinsed his brush, the water turning faintly gray. "Each place we walk leaves a mark upon us. But it also carries a trace of us within itself, a whisper, a warmth, a scent." He looked toward the nearest scroll, a bridge over a frozen stream. "When I paint, those whispers return. The road paints itself through my hand. The dream and the dreamer become one stroke." Ren gazed at the painting. For a heartbeat, he could smell winter air, feel the crunch of snow beneath his feet. He heard laughter, distant, young, familiar. Then the image faded back into stillness. Ren sat beside the painter. For a while, neither spoke. The only sound was the soft tapping of the train's wheels below, echoing the rhythm of the brush above. Finally, Ren said, "I used to write poems." The painter's eyes twinkled. "Used to?" "I stopped," Ren said quietly. The words began to feel hollow. I could no longer find what was true in them. The old man nodded, dipping his brush again. "Truth is like ink. It must be watered with time to flow again." Ren smiled faintly. "And if the ink dries?" "Then you write with the emptiness it leaves," said the painter. "That is when your art becomes honest." He handed Ren a small sheet of rice paper. "Here," he said. "Write a single word." Ren hesitated. "What word?" "Any," said the painter. "But let it carry more silence than sound." Ren thought for a long while. Then, slowly, he dipped the brush and wrote, Hero the way home. The brushstroke trembled slightly, but the ink glowed faintly in the lantern light. The old man leaned in, studying it. "Ah," he murmured. "That word is not written, it is remembered." As Ren watched, the paper began to shimmer. The characters lifted softly from the page, dissolving into threads of light that drifted upward like fireflies. They wove themselves into the air, forming the faint outline of a road stretching into darkness, lined with lanterns that pulsed like beating hearts. Ren stared, awestruck. "It's beautiful." The painter smiled. "It is yours. Every word, every image you once loved, they never leave. They only wait to be seen again in another form." He looked at Ren with gentle eyes. "Do you understand now? Dreams are not escapes. They are returns." The train gave a soft hum beneath them. The scrolls on the walls began to curl, one by one, as though the night had finished its story. The painter gathered his brushes, tucking them neatly into a cloth roll. "Time to go," he said softly. "The road will carry you further than I can." Ren stood, bowing deeply. "Thank you, Master." The painter chuckled. "No need for thanks. Just promise me one thing." "What is that?" "When you wake, do not call this a dream too quickly. Art is simply the part of dreaming that refuses to fade." Ren nodded. "I will remember." As he stepped back into the corridor, the door behind him slid shut. He turned once more and saw that the carriage was gone. In its place was only a window of night, endless and quiet. The train moved forward, stars reflecting in its glass like ink drops on silk. Ren touched his hand to his chest, feeling warmth there, not of sorrow, but of gentle clarity. He whispered to himself, "To paint is to remember. To remember is to live twice." The hum of the train answered softly, as if agreeing. And far ahead, through the mist and moonlight, a faint glow began to appear, the signal of another destination waiting to be dreamed. Chapter 6: The Garden of Eternal Rain. The train slowed to a whisper. Its rhythm, once steady and warm, began to dissolve into the soft patter of falling rain. Ren lifted his head. The lanterns within the carriage dimmed, their flames bending toward the sound, as though bowing to something older than light itself. Outside the window, the world was silver. A rain without beginning or end fell gently upon a vast garden, stone paths, moss, bamboo, all blurred beneath a delicate veil of mist. It was not storm, nor sorrow. It was the kind of rain that seemed to breathe, as if each drop carried the memory of another life. The train came to rest. Ren stepped outside. The moment his feet touched the ground, the world grew quiet, the kind of silence that exists between heartbeats. Rain brushed against his sleeves, cool but comforting. Before him stretched a garden, vast and eternal. Stone lanterns glowed faintly along a winding path. A pond mirrored the falling sky, rippling with each drop like the slow turning of time itself. He began to walk. The sound of the rain became a rhythm not of sadness, but of return. Each step seemed to echo a wordless truth, something older than memory. At the center of the garden stood a pavilion, its roof curved like the wings of a crane. A figure waited there, cloaked in white, sitting beside a shallow basin where water gathered from the roof's edge. The figure's face was serene, ageless. They looked neither man nor woman, but something in between or beyond. Ren approached and bowed. "Forgive my intrusion." The figure smiled faintly. "You have not intruded. The rain invited you." Ren hesitated. "Then this place. This is where time forgets to move," the figure said. "The garden of eternal rain. Those who enter here carry questions that cannot survive silence." Ren knelt beside the basin. In its surface, he saw his reflection blurred, scattered, and endlessly redrawn by the falling drops. The figure spoke again, softly. "Tell me, traveler, what is it that you seek?" Ren thought for a moment. "My journey began without purpose. I boarded the train because I could not bear the stillness of my own heart. And now?" Now he looked at the water. "I wish to understand why I must remember what I've tried to forget." The figure nodded. "Ah, the oldest longing to make peace with the flow." They dipped their hand into the basin. The ripples spread outward, and for an instant, the rain seemed to pause, suspended in the air. "Look," they said. "What do you see?" Ren peered into the basin. He saw Kyoto again, its streets glistening, its bridges shining like threads between moments. He saw his past self, walking, writing, waiting. And beneath it all, he saw the current, the same current that carried every tear, every word, every memory. The figure's voice wove through the rain. "The river does not regret its bends. The clouds do not mourn their rain. Yet humans, they grasp each drop as if it were meant to stay." Ren whispered, "Because we fear losing what made us feel alive." The figure smiled. "And yet, you never lose it. The moment you remember, it is already reborn somewhere else, in another form." They gestured to the pond. "Watch." Ren turned. Across the pond, flowers began to bloom one by one, slowly, quietly. They were pale, translucent, as if made of rain itself. Each one pulsed softly with inner light, then faded into mist the moment it fully opened. Ren stared. "They disappear." The figure shook their head. "No. They returned to the water that made them. They touched Ren's hand lightly. Every love, every grief, every dream, they are rain. You do not lose them. You carry them in the air you breathe, the words you write, the silence you keep. Ren closed his eyes. For the first time since his journey began, he felt tears not of sorrow, but of recognition. They mingled with the falling rain, and he could no longer tell which were his own. He whispered, "Then I have not been wandering." "No," the figure said. "You have been raining." Ren looked up, startled, but the figure's expression was calm, luminous. "Your journey is not from place to place," they continued, "but from drop to drop, from the first tear you shed to the last that will fall." The rain grew softer, turning almost musical, a rhythm like a lullaby sung by the world itself. Ren rose slowly. The pavilion, the pond, even the figure began to blur into mist, as though they were being painted over by light. The figure's voice lingered, gentle as falling water. "When you leave here, do not seek the end of rain. Seek instead the joy of being carried by it." Ren bowed deeply. When he looked up again, he was alone. The garden had become a reflection, a perfect mirror of sky and rain, as though he stood between two eternities. Far off, through the drifting silver mist, he saw the faint outline of the train waiting. Ren walked toward it, each step rippling across the mirrored ground like brushstrokes of quiet acceptance. As he reached the door, he turned once more toward the endless rain. And softly, he spoke, "If I must fall, may it be with grace." The door closed behind him. The train began to move once more, cutting through the rain like a brush through ink. Inside, Ren sat by the window, watching droplets trace their paths down the glass. They met, merged, separated, each carrying its own reflection of the moon. He smiled faintly, and somewhere within the sound of the rain, he thought he heard the figure's voice again. The journey is not about reaching the shore. It is about learning to flow. The train's lanterns shimmered, and the night unfolded like a scroll unending. Chapter 7: The Temple of Silent Bells. The train drifted through the last veil of rain and entered stillness. No rhythm, no hum, only the vast hush of a world that had forgotten to breathe. Ren opened his eyes. Outside the window stretched a mountain of stone and shadow. At its peak stood a single temple, half-veiled by clouds, its roof gleaming faintly beneath a pale and endless moon. There was no wind, no birds, not even the whisper of leaves. Only silence, complete, unbroken, alive. The train stopped. Ren stepped onto the mountain path. His footsteps made no sound upon the stones. Even his breath felt muted, as though the air itself were listening. He climbed slowly. The path wound upward through mist and moonlight, passing through arches of cedar and ancient gates carved with prayers too faint to read. The silence deepened with each step. It was not emptiness, but fullness, the stillness of a held note that had forgotten it once was music. At last, he reached the temple. Its doors stood open, though no wind had moved them. Lanterns hung unlit beneath the eaves, their paper white as bone. Inside, the air was cool. An enormous bell hung at the center of the hall, its bronze surface darkened by centuries. It was massive, ancient, and yet, no rope, no mallet, no mark of sound remained. Ren approached it carefully. A faint light shimmered along its edge, as though the moon itself had poured its reflection into the metal. He reached out, placing his hand upon it. The surface was warm. In that instant, the silence around him changed. It deepened not in absence, but in presence. 1,000 unspoken voices filled the air, each one softer than thought. Ren closed his eyes, and he heard the bell. But there was no sound. It rang within him, a vibration that resonated through bone and memory, reverberating not through ears, but through being. Images unfolded in the silence. The woman by the river. The fox upon the bridge. The painter with his living scrolls. The figure in the rain. Each appeared for a breath, bowed, and faded into light. Their voices, or perhaps their silence, spoke as one. All that you sought was never elsewhere. The sound you waited for was your own heartbeat. Ren's chest trembled. He placed both hands upon the bell, and the warmth grew. He felt the pulse of every step, every breath, every word he had written and forgotten. The silence within the temple became infinite. He opened his eyes. The world was made of stillness, not dead, but luminous. Dust drifted through the air like snow. The moonlight pooled upon the floor, and he could see faintly his own reflection within it, not as a man, but as light shaped like a thought. He whispered, and though no sound came, the words filled the temple. To be silent is not to disappear. It is to return to what never left. Then, he bowed deeply before the bell. When he lifted his head again, the temple had begun to dissolve, the pillars turning to mist, the walls to light. Only the bell remained, shining softly, its form fading until it was no more than a circle in the air. A perfect emptiness that vibrated with the memory of sound. Ren stepped through it. And once again, he was on the train. The carriage was brighter now. Dawn faint, delicate brushed the horizon. Ren sat quietly, hands folded, eyes half closed. For the first time, he did not wonder where the train was going. He simply listened to the hum of the rails, to the soft breathing of the wind, to the silence that was no longer empty, but whole. He smiled. Outside, the world was slowly awakening. Kyoto, perhaps, or something older. And somewhere, in that boundless quiet, a bell rang once more without sound, without end. Chapter 8: The Return to Dawn. The train moved through the edge of night, that fragile hour when stars fade, and the first breath of dawn begins to stir the world awake. Ren sat by the window, watching darkness soften into light. The landscape beyond no longer shifted like dreams. It was still, real, and yet more beautiful for its simplicity. The mist of the mountains rose like sighs. Rivers glimmered with pale gold. And far ahead, the faintest trace of Kyoto's rooftops shimmered under the coming sun. The world was returning, and so was he. He placed a hand upon the glass. The reflection that looked back at him was both his and not his, a face familiar, yet lighter, as if it had been washed clean by silence. He thought of the bell, the rain, the fox, the painter, the woman by the river. None was separate now. They flowed together, like rivers merging into a sea. Ren whispered, "There was never a journey. Only the remembering of one." The words drifted through the carriage, quiet as the breath of dawn itself. The train slowed. A soft chime rang, not mechanical, but tender, as though the air itself had decided to sing once more. Outside, a station appeared, small, wooden, wrapped in mist. Its sign read faintly Kawaramachi. Ren smiled. He knew this place. And yet, it felt different, as though the world had been rewritten in gentler ink. He stood, gathering nothing but the warmth that lingered in his chest. When the door slid open, the air was cool and smelled of earth, rain, and morning fire. He stepped down onto the platform. The train behind him gave a low, contented sigh, the sound of something that had finished its purpose. Ren turned, and for a moment, he thought he saw silhouettes in the windows. Akari, the tea housekeeper. Bowing her head, the fox with golden eyes, the painter dipping his brush, the rain figure standing beneath her white hood. All watching him, all smiling. Then the train began to fade, its lanterns dissolving into threads of light that drifted upward like the final notes of a song too beautiful to end. Ren stood alone. The morning sun touched the world gently, and the mist began to lift. Kyoto awakened around him, temple bells ringing in the distance, vendors opening their doors, a child's laughter breaking the last of the silence. He began to walk, each step echoing softly upon the wet stone streets. The air shimmered, and for a heartbeat, he thought he could still hear the rhythm of the rails, that steady, eternal heartbeat of the train. He smiled again. The night was never gone, he murmured. It simply learned how to shine in the day. He crossed the bridge over the Kamo River. The water flowed quietly beneath him, the same as it had for centuries, always moving, always remembering. Ren paused at the center, watching his reflection ripple and reform. For the first time, he did not look for meaning in it. He simply watched and let it be. The wind carried the scent of tea leaves and morning rain. Somewhere, a temple bell rang, its sound faint, but real. And in that sound, Ren felt everything he had ever lost, and everything he had become. He walked on. Behind him, the sun rose over the rooftops, casting long shadows that glimmered like gold silk. Ahead, the streets of Kyoto stretched open, a map drawn not in ink, but in memory. Ren's journey had ended, but his steps had only just begun. He did not know where they would lead, and for once, that uncertainty felt like peace. As the city awoke, the light grew brighter, and the last trace of the train faded into the sky. And with a quiet smile, Ren whispered, "All dreams are departures, but some departures are home." Epilogue: The Last Lantern of Kyoto. Morning had come to Kyoto, but its light was not loud. It spilled gently through the streets like warm ink, painting every tile and roof with the quiet promise of beginning again. Ren walked slowly, his steps unhurried, his heart still carrying the hush of the mountain temple. The world around him moved, vendors lifting their shutters, monks sweeping temple courtyards, children chasing the morning wind, and yet it all felt softer, as though the dream had not fully left. He wandered through narrow alleys, past paper lanterns still unlit from the night before. Some bore the names of tea houses, others carried no words at all, only the faint brushstrokes of forgotten poems. He followed them, each one swaying gently in the breeze, as if guiding him somewhere unseen. At last, they led him to a small shrine at the edge of the Kamo River. It was one he had never noticed before, a simple wooden gate, a stone path lined with moss, and a single lantern hanging at its entrance. The lantern was dim, its paper yellowed with years. Yet within it glowed a faint light, a light that pulsed like memory, like the heartbeat of a dream not ready to fade. Ren approached and knelt. The light within the lantern flickered, and he felt, rather than heard, a whisper rise from it. Every night leaves one lantern unextinguished. It waits for those who remember. Ren closed his eyes. The air trembled softly. He saw again the figures of his journey. Akari's calm smile, the fox's golden gaze, the painter's brush trailing into mist, the rain woman's bowed head beneath her hood. Each of them, one by one, placed a hand over the lantern's flame. And with every touch, the light grew steadier, not brighter, but deeper, like the glow beneath closed eyelids. Ren reached forward. His fingers brushed the old paper frame. The warmth spread through him, the same warmth he had felt when touching the silent bell. For a breath, he was nowhere, not in dream, not in waking, but in the gentle space between. Then he whispered, "Thank you for letting me ride." And with that, the flame within the lantern flared once, then steadied again, not as fire, but as golden stillness. He lifted the lantern carefully and placed it upon the river's surface. The water carried it away, slowly, peacefully, its reflection shimmering like twin moons. Downstream, other lanterns began to appear, dozens, then hundreds, gliding through mist and light. They were not mere offerings, but the memories of every dream that had ever drifted through Kyoto. Each lantern a night, each night a journey. As Ren watched, the river became a glowing ribbon, flowing through the heart of the city and into the horizon where night and dawn met as equals. He felt no sadness, only a quiet joy, the joy of knowing that nothing truly ended, that silence was simply another kind of song. A breeze passed, and in it, he thought he heard the distant echo of the train, a rhythm too soft for sound, too true for forgetting. He smiled once more and whispered to the morning air, "Sleep well, old train. I will walk from here." The sun rose higher, and the city's bells began to toll. Each note rang like a ripple of light, filling the air with gentle motion. The lanterns on the river drifted beyond sight, their glow dissolving into day. Ren turned away, his steps light, his heart still humming with that eternal silence. A silence that was no longer empty, but full of everything that had ever been. And somewhere, beyond the veil of time and dream, the midnight train through Kyoto stirred once more, its lanterns flickering in the distance, waiting quietly for the next traveler who dares to dream between worlds. Gentle rain over Tokyo rooftops. Prologue, the sound of rainfall on memory. The night had no edges. It was all rain falling softly over Tokyo, sliding down windows, pooling in forgotten corners of the city where neon lights and silence met. Somewhere beneath that endless gray sky, a man sat awake, listening to the rain breathe. Each drop seemed to hold a voice, a whisper from somewhere far away, a story half remembered, a dream that had dissolved into water. He could not tell if he was hearing the rain or if the rain was listening to him. Outside his window, the rooftops glimmered like quiet seas. Steam rose from vents, and the hum of distant traffic wove through the downpour like a sleeping pulse. Tokyo, at that hour, was neither awake nor asleep. I was thinking. Every drop of rain was a thought, falling from the sky onto glass, onto metal, onto the soft skin of umbrellas drifting below. Somewhere, a taxi turned, its headlights bending through the mist. Somewhere, a vending machine blinked, its soft glow keeping watch over the sleepless. The man poured tea, the steam curling upward, joining the rhythm of the rain. He had lived in this small apartment for years, and yet tonight, the sound outside felt different, not noise, but music written by time itself. He leaned closer to the window, watching droplets chase each other down the glass. Each one left a faint trail, like handwriting fading in the dark. And then he thought perhaps the rain was not falling at all. Perhaps it was rising, returning home from the streets below, carrying stories it had collected from every heart it had touched. Far across the city, a woman closed her shop in Ginza. A student hurried through Shibuya's lights, his reflection splintered across the pavement. A cat curled beneath a convenience store awning, eyes glowing like twin moons. Every life, every heartbeat, was wrapped in the same gentle sound, the rain that fell over everything, and forgave everything. The man closed his eyes. The rain became his breath, the rooftops his heartbeat. He felt the city moving beneath him, quiet, patient, alive. Somewhere, a temple bell rang faint, distant, as though struck in another lifetime. Its tone dissolved into the sound of water. And in that moment, the man realized something simple, something vast. Tokyo was dreaming, and he was part of that dream. Outside, the rain went on, gentle, endless. It erased footprints, softened sounds, blurred lights into halos of sleep. Every drop carried a story. Every rooftop held a memory. And above them all, the rain whispered, "Listen closely. The city remembers you." Chapter 1 Shibuya in slow motion. The rain had grown thicker by the time the trains stopped for the night. Their echoes drifted upward from the underground, soft and metallic, like a lullaby meant for machines. Above, the city pulsed beneath umbrellas. Each one moved slowly through the glow of streetlights, as if the whole world had slipped into slow motion. Neon blurred into watercolor. Car lights stretched into ribbons. Reflections trembled on the wet asphalt, turning the intersection into a vast, breathing mirror. Shibuya at night, a living ocean of motion and stillness. The man from the apartment walked there sometimes, drawn not by purpose but by sound. He loved the way rain transformed the city, how it stripped everything of sharpness, softened even loneliness into something gentle. He stood at the edge of the crossing, watching hundreds of umbrellas open and close, a silent choreography of strangers. Every light change was a heartbeat. Every footstep, a memory leaving its trace in water. The rain pressed against his coat, cold and tender, as though the city itself were whispering to him. Don't rush. You are already where you are meant to be. At that hour, the crowd moved differently. No one hurried. Even time seemed to pause at the center of the crossing, waiting for something unnamed. Under one blue umbrella, a young woman stopped to tie her shoe. Beneath a red one, an elderly man gazed up at the skyscrapers, his eyes reflecting every window's glow. And there by the edge of the scramble, a busker strummed a guitar beneath the shelter of a cafe awning, his song lost beneath the rain, yet somehow still reaching every listener's heart. The man found himself walking without thinking. His steps matched the rhythm of the falling rain. Down past the bookstore, past the 24-hour cafe, past the line of vending machines humming softly in the mist. Each sound became part of a greater harmony, the hum of electricity, the hiss of tires, the sigh of doors sliding open and closed. Tokyo was a symphony, and tonight, the conductor was the rain. He paused by a window. Inside, a small gallery glowed with warm light. A painting hung alone upon the wall, a canvas of rooftops and rainfall. Tokyo seen from above, as if the city were floating between sky and sea. The artist's name was written in delicate brushstrokes, Aki. The man smiled faintly. He did not know her, but the image felt familiar, as though he had once stood on that very rooftop, watching the same gentle rain. Outside again, he walked beneath the giant screen that flickered with half-muted ads. For a moment, he saw his reflection in it, a face softened by the mist, his outline merging with color and light. And in that fragile reflection, he thought he saw someone else, a shadow beside him, smiling quietly. He blinked, and she was gone. Only rain remained. The signal changed. People began to cross again. Hundreds of umbrellas opened at once, a field of flowers blooming beneath the lights. The man stepped forward. In that moment, as every movement slowed, every drop of water hung in the air, he felt as though the city were holding its breath. And he realized it was not the rain that slowed time. It was listening to its own heartbeat, its own quiet, endless song. He smiled. The rain answered softly, a sound not of sadness, but of peace. And somewhere above the noise and the glow, the rooftops of Tokyo shimmered like the surface of a dream. Chapter 2: The Woman in the Window Above Ginza. The rain followed him all the way to Ginza. It softened the neon, draped the streets in a silk gray sheen, and turned every reflection into a painting that breathed. Shops were closing, signs dimming one by one, and the air smelled faintly of perfume, tea, and wet asphalt. He walked without hurry, his umbrella tilted against the wind, listening to the hum of rain against glass. It was a language he was beginning to understand. Above one of the narrow streets, a quiet lane tucked behind the silver towers, a window glowed. Its light was warm, golden, unwavering. In the world of rain and chrome, it looked almost ancient, as though it belonged to another century. Behind the window, a woman sat by a small table. Her hair was dark, her movements slow and deliberate. She lifted a brush, dipped it into ink, and wrote upon delicate paper with a grace that made time forget itself. He stopped in the street below, drawn by the stillness that hung around that window. Each stroke she made seemed to echo faintly in the rain, as though the city itself were listening. He could not see what she was writing, but the motion of her hand, that slow, fluid rhythm, spoke of patience, of memory, of quiet longing. The window framed her like a lantern in the dark. Occasionally, she would look up, as if sensing someone watching. Her gaze would drift outward, past the falling rain, past the city, towards something unseen. And every time she did, he felt as though she were looking straight through him, not at him, but at the place in him where silence lived. A small shop occupied the first floor below her window. Its shutters were half drawn, but he could still see the sign painted above the door. Nakamura lanterns since 1899. He smiled faintly. Of course. A light like that could only belong to a maker of lamps. He imagined the woman upstairs crafting words as her ancestors had crafted light, patiently, by hand, one glow at a time. The rain deepened, filling the street with its whispering pulse. He stood there for a long while, until the lights around him blurred into soft halos. The woman placed her brush down. She reached for the lamp beside her and adjusted its wick. The flame brightened, reflected once in the glass, then twice in her eyes. For a moment, the rain seemed to pause, as though bowing to her quiet ritual. Then she did something he did not expect. She turned toward the window, opened it a little, and let the rain in. The scent of wet air filled the room. Drops touched the paper on her desk, smudging the fresh ink into faint blue rivers. But she did not move to save it. She only smiled a small, secret smile and whispered something he could not hear. The man below lifted his head. For an instant, the streetlight caught her face, calm, timeless, softened by rain and flame. He thought she looked like a memory learning how to breathe again. Then the window closed. The light inside dimmed slightly, settling into a steady, golden pulse. He stood there until the shutters of the shop below were fully drawn, and the street returned to darkness. When he finally turned to leave, he glanced once more at the wet pavement. There, reflected faintly between puddles, was the glow from her lamp, trembling, but unextinguished. As he walked away, he realized he was humming. He did not know the tune, only that it matched the rhythm of the falling rain. And somewhere high above, behind that single glowing window, the woman dipped her brush again, writing the next line of a letter she would never send. Chapter 3 Letters Found in the Rain. The morning after felt lighter, as though the city had exhaled. The rain had slowed to a gentle drizzle, the kind that brushes the air like breath on glass. Tokyo shimmered in a delicate half-light, each rooftop steaming softly, each street glistening with the memory of night. The man walked aimlessly again, his umbrella hanging loose at his side. He liked the city after rain when its noise had been washed away, when everything looked a little more human. At the corner of an alley near Yurakucho, something caught his eye. A paper envelope, soggy and pale, clung to the edge of a drain. He bent down and picked it up carefully. It was worn thin, its ink blurred but not yet gone. There was no name on it. No address. Only a faint red stamp in the corner, its mark almost lost to water. He hesitated, then gently opened it. Inside was a single sheet of paper, folded once, smelling faintly of rain and ink. The handwriting was beautiful, flowing and deliberate, the kind that belonged to another time. It read, "If you are reading this, then perhaps the rain has chosen you. I left this letter to be found, not by chance, but by the rhythm of the city itself. There are words I never spoke, and places I never went. But I have learned that silence also leaves footprints. Do not hurry. The world is not running away. It is only waiting for you to notice how softly it moves." He stopped walking. The words felt as though they had been written for him, or perhaps by him, in a life he no longer remembered. The paper trembled in his hands. Each droplet of rain that touched it seemed to reveal more of the ink, as if the letter were still being written. He read it again, slowly, letting each line fall like a drop into his heart. And at the bottom of the page, he found one last line, almost erased by water. "Meet me where the city forgets its name." He folded the letter back into its envelope. The paper had become fragile, but the words, they felt indestructible. He slipped it into his pocket, and for the rest of the day, he could feel its faint weight against his chest, like a pulse. As evening fell, the rain returned, softly at first, then steady and sure. He stood beneath an awning and watched people pass, umbrellas blooming and closing like breathing flowers. He wondered if anyone else had ever found one of these letters. If the city had been scattering them for years, decades, perhaps tiny messages written by those who once walked the same streets, listened to the same rain. A memory stirred the woman in the window above Ginza. The brush in her hand. The way she had opened the window and let the rain fall across her paper. Could it be? He smiled quietly, not needing an answer. The letter was no longer a mystery. It was a continuation, a message passed from one listener of rain to another. When he finally stepped back into the street, he let the umbrella close. Raindrops touched his hair, his eyelids, the skin of his hands. He lifted his face to the sky and whispered, "All right, I'm listening." And the rain replied, in its endless, tender language, "Then keep walking." Chapter 4: The Cat Beneath the Lawson Sign. The rain never really left Tokyo. It only changed its rhythm, sometimes a whisper, sometimes a hum, a silence so deep it became a sound of its own. And on nights like this, when the streets glowed like glass and steam rose from manholes like ghosts, the cat appeared. He was small, black as midnight ink, with one white paw that looked as though he had stepped in snow long ago. He lived beneath the bright blue light of a Lawson sign, in the shadow of a vending machine that never slept. Every night, he watched the people come and go, students, dreamers, lovers, office workers with umbrellas dripping like tears. He saw everything. He remembered everyone. The man from the previous night, the one who had found the letter, passed by again. The cat tilted his head, his golden eyes following the man's reflection in the wet pavement. The man did not see him. But the cat saw something else. He saw the faint glow around the letter tucked into the man's coat, a warm, soft and pale, as though the paper carried a quiet soul. He meowed once, a low, melodic sound that echoed strangely in the empty street. It was not a call for food. It was a greeting. Few noticed, but this cat had lived in the city longer than most buildings. He had slept beneath countless signs, watched towers rise and fall, and heard the old tram bells fade into silence. And through it all, he had guarded something invisible, the gentleness that rain leaves behind. He knew when the city was hurting. He could tell when a street had forgotten how to dream. On those nights, he would walk through puddle sand, leave small, silent footprints that glowed for only a moment before fading. Tiny lanterns for the lost. Tonight, the cat waited beneath the Lawson sign, watching the reflections ripple across the street. The smell of fried food and rain mixed in the air. A delivery truck hissed by. Somewhere, a song leaked faintly from a bar 2 blocks away, a woman's voice, low and distant, singing of stars that never set. The cat listened, ears twitching. He understood that song. It was a lullaby for the city itself. Then, suddenly, the man stopped. He felt something, a gaze, a shimmer, a pause in the rhythm of rain. He turned slightly and saw the cat. Their eyes met. Neither moved. The man crouched down slowly, his knees brushing the wet pavement. He held out a hand, open and still. The cat didn't approach. Instead, he blinked once, twice, a gesture so slow and calm that it felt like a secret being shared. And in that blink, the man felt warmth spread through his chest. He whispered, almost to himself, "Do you know her? The woman in the window?" The cat's tail curled gently, and he blinked again. That was enough. The rain softened. Steam rose like breath from the ground. The cat stood, stretched, and began to walk down the alley. The man hesitated, then followed, not out of curiosity, but because the cat's steps sounded like memory. They passed narrow lanes, lamps glowing like candles in puddles, posters peeling, bicycles glistening with silver rain. Finally, the cat stopped beside a small, forgotten shrine, half hidden between 2 modern buildings. There, beneath the stone torii, lay a single folded paper, its edges dark with rain. The same handwriting. The man knelt and picked it up. Inside, the words were faint, as though they had waited years to be read. If you ever feel alone, listen for the sound between the raindrops. That is where all lost things rest. He looked up, but the cat was gone. Only the sound of rain remained, and the soft flicker of the Lawson sign, blue and eternal. That night, when he returned home, he placed the 2 letters beside his bed. Outside, the rain began again, soft and endless. And somewhere, beneath the hum of the city, a cat purred, a sound like the quiet turning of the world. Chapter 5: The Bridge That Appears Only in Rain. Somewhere in Tokyo, there is a bridge that no map remembers. It is not built of stone or steel, but of reflection, a thin shimmer of light that appears only when the rain falls just right. No one ever plans to find it. You simply turn a corner, and suddenly, there it is, a small arch of trembling silver stretching across a street that wasn't there a moment ago. And when you cross it, you feel the strange weightlessness of remembering something you never lived. That night, the man walked aimlessly again. The rain had returned, soft and steady, as though it had been waiting for him. He passed the familiar Lawson sign, half expecting to see the cat again. But there was only the hum of the vending machine and the faint ripple of puddles in blue light. He continued, turning into narrower streets, where the lamps flickered and the air smelled faintly of incense and wet earth. The city felt older there. The walls were darker, the windows smaller, and the sound of rain more human, like quiet breathing. Then, as he turned one more corner, the world seemed to hold its breath. The rain slowed. The reflections deepened. And there, between two half-collapsed warehouses, stood the bridge. It was small, no wider than a car, its railings made of black lacquer, its surface glimmering as if carved from liquid glass. The rain fell softly through it, not on it, but through it, as though it existed in two worlds at once. He stood still for a long time, unsure if he should cross. Something about the air around it felt alive, the way light bends around a flame. It was neither cold nor warm, but full of presence. And faintly, from the other side, he heard music. A shamisen, maybe. Or perhaps it was only the rain, striking the bridge's surface like strings. Either way, it was beautiful. He stepped forward. The first touch of his shoe upon the bridge felt impossibly light, like walking on memory. Each step sent ripples beneath his feet, ripples of sound, of scent, of faces half remembered. He saw flashes in the water below, a child laughing in a narrow alley, a woman pouring tea in a quiet room, a man painting lanterns by moonlight. Each image shone for a moment, then drifted away. He realized they were memories of the city. Not his, not anyone's, but the city's own. In the middle of the bridge, he stopped. The rain had grown silent here, as if it were listening. He looked down into the surface below, not water, not a mirror, something in between. There, he saw his own reflection. But it was not him. The figure looked older, wiser, and sadder, holding a brush, not an umbrella. The same brush the woman in Ginza had used. He watched as the reflection lifted its gazine, smiled. Then, softly, the image began to dissolve, as though it had been waiting only to be seen once more before fading back into the rain. He whispered into the quiet, "Thank you," and though no one answered, he felt a pulse in the air, a warmth that spread through the bridge beneath him, through his chest, through the rain. For the first time, he understood. The bridge wasn't there to cross. It was there to remember. When he finally turned back, the bridge was already fading, its shape dissolving into mist and light. By the time his feet touched the street again, there was nothing left but the reflection of falling rain. He looked down at his shoes, dry, as if he had never walked there at all. Only one thing remained, a faint ink mark on his fingertips, the same deep blue as the letters he had found before. He smiled, and for the first time, he didn't feel alone. The rain fell gently around him, soft, endless, and knowing. Above the city, a bridge shimmered, once more visible only to those who still believed that rain remembers. Chapter 6: The Last Train Before the Rain Stops. The rain was softer now, not gone, but turning into mist, as if the sky itself was learning how to sleep. Tokyo's neon shimmered faintly behind a thin veil of fog, each color quieter than it had been the night before. It was almost midnight. The man found himself at an old station he didn't remember ever visiting. The sign above the entrance was faded, the paint peeled, the letters half erased by time. Tsukiji-Mei Line closed. And yet, the gate was open. A faint light flickered from below. He descended the stairs slowly. Each step echoed softly, like drops of water falling into a deep well. The air smelled of metal, rain, and memory. The platform was nearly empty. Only one bench, one vending machine humming, and the faint sound of tracks cooling in the night. A single lantern hung from the ceiling, its glow swaying gently in the damp air. He sat down on the bench. There was no reason to wait, and yet, he was waiting. For what, he wasn't sure. The silence was deep but kind, like the pause between two heartbeats. He took the two letters from his pocket and placed them on the seat beside him. Their paper was still soft from rain, but the ink had settled as if the words had finally accepted their place in time. The sound came in a low hum from the far end of the tunnel. It grew slowly, like thunder wrapped in velvet. Light followed a soft, silvery glow that filled the platform. And before long, a train slid soundlessly into view. Its cars gleamed like mirrors. No destination was written. The doors opened with a sigh. He stood up, hesitating. There was no conductor, no passengers, only the quiet, endless reflection of the lantern light. He stepped inside. The doors closed. The train began to move, not with speed, but with grace, as though gliding through a dream. Outside the windows, Tokyo drifted by in pieces: rooftops, signs, bridges, all softened by fog. And among them, faces appeared: the woman in the Ginza window, the cat beneath the Lawson sign, the old lantern maker, even the reflection he had seen on the bridge. Each one smiled. Each one vanished. He reached into his coat and unfolded the letters once more. But now, the ink shimmered differently, not blue, but silver, as though written in moonlight. He could barely read the words, but their meaning came to him all the same. Everything you have lost still breathes in the rain. Every sound, every silence, every step, they all lead you here. He closed his eyes. The rhythm of the train was like a heartbeat, slow, steady, infinite. He felt himself drifting, not away, but deeper into the space between raindrops, where all forgotten things finally rest. When he opened his eyes again, the train had stopped. The doors slid open. Beyond them was no platform, only the city, bathed in soft dawn light. The rain had stopped. The air was clear, carrying the faint scent of wet stone and new beginnings. He stepped out. Behind him, the train shone briefly, then dissolved into mist. He looked up. The sky was pale, the first hint of morning stretching over Tokyo's rooftops. Somewhere, a cat meowed. Somewhere else, a woman closed her window. The world was awake again. He smiled not because he understood, but because he didn't need to anymore. He walked toward the light, and for a moment, it felt as though every puddle, every drop of rain, was quietly saying goodbye. Epilogue: when Tokyo sleeps again. Morning rose quietly, as if the sky were afraid to wake the city. The rain had gone, leaving behind a faint silver mist that clung to rooftops and telephone wires. Every droplet that lingered on glass or leaf caught the new light and held it like a memory refusing to fade. Tokyo did not rush. For once, the city seemed to breathe. The traffic lights blinked lazily. A delivery truck moved through the narrow streets with the sound of soft tires on damp asphalt. Somewhere, a convenience store door chimed open, and the scent of fresh coffee filled the air. Everything ordinary, everything sacred. On a small balcony overlooking the river, a woman sat beside a pot of green tea. Steam rose from the cup, curling like the ghosts of last night's rain. It was the same woman who once wrote beneath the window in Ginza. Her brush rested beside her hand, and the lamp that had glowed through countless storms was now unlit, its oil spent. She looked toward the horizon, where sunlight touched the tallest buildings, and whispered, "Oyasumi," not to herself, but to the night that had carried her so far. Across the city, beneath the familiar blue glow of a Lawson sign, a small black cat stretched. He blinked once at the morning light, licked the rain from his paw, and watched the people beginning their day. The world above him moved quickly again, umbrellas closing, shutters opening, voices rising like music. But the cat did not move. He simply listened. Because he knew what few others did. Tokyo never truly wakes. It only shifts from one dream to another. By the riverside, the man walked slowly. His shoes pressed softly against wet earth, each step erasing the footprints of the night before. He carried no umbrella now. The air was light on his face, smelling of rain and new beginnings. In his pocket, the letters had dried. Their ink had faded, but he no longer needed to read them. He already knew what they said. He crossed a bridge, a real one this time, made of steel and stone. But for a moment, as the sunlight hit the water below, he thought he saw a shimmer, a reflection bending like a dream remembering itself. And then it was gone. He smiled. The city continued around him, buses sighing at corners, bicycles whispering through puddles, birds returning to wires that still glistened from rain. And somewhere in the distance, a faint sound of a train echoed through the morning air, not the real one, but the one that carried him through the night. The last train before the rain stopped. He stopped walking, closed his eyes, listened. He could still hear it, a slow rhythm fading into silence, like a heartbeat merging with the world. For a brief, perfect moment, he felt as though the whole city was breathing in time with him. Then, gently, the feeling dissolved. The cat yawned. The woman finished her tea. The letters rested quietly in the man's hand. And above them all, Tokyo exhaled its towers, its rivers, its countless windows, like a great organism finally at peace. Rain clouds drifted away, leaving behind a sky so pale it looked almost like paper before the first brushstroke. The city was ready to be written again. If you were standing there, and if you listened closely enough, you might still hear it, the faint hum beneath the morning light, the sound of the rain that had carried all these dreams. It says, everything that was lost has simply gone to sleep. And everything you remember will one day return with the rain. And when the wind moved through the streets, it carried with it the scent of wet stone, fresh bread, and something softer still. The quiet echo of a dream called Tokyo. Whispering pines of Mount Koya. Prologue. The bell beyond the mist. The mist was heavy that night, not like a veil, but like the slow breath of a sleeping world. The mountain waited in silence, its ancient paths winding through forests of cedar and pine, each tree whispering to the next. From somewhere unseen, a bell rang. Its sound rolled gently through the fog, neither near nor far, as if it came from within the mountain itself. The traveler paused on the stone steps. He had been walking for hours, perhaps days, he could no longer tell. The air was cool, damp, and alive with quiet things. Pine needles clung to his robes. Drops of mist glimmered like small lanterns in his hair. He carried little with him, a wooden staff, a pouch of rice, and an old letter sealed with red wax. The letter bore no name. Only 3 faint characters were written on the paper: Nemuri no Michi, the path of sleep. The traveler climbed higher. Each step brought a deeper hush, as though the world itself was drawing closer to its own heart. Stone statues lined the trail, their faces softened by moss and time. Some smiled faintly, others seemed to watch him with closed eyes, as if they, too, were dreaming. The bell sounded again, long, slow, and tender. It echoed through the forest, and the traveler felt it in his chest, a vibration that matched the rhythm of his heartbeat. He whispered to no one, "Whose bell do I follow?" The mist did not answer. But the pines around him swayed, and for a moment, he thought he heard a voice, soft, almost human, carried on the wind. "You walk between breaths. Do not seek the temple. It will find you when you are ready." He stopped. The air trembled, and then stilled. Only the sound of falling dew remained. At last, he reached a small clearing. In the center stood a wooden gate, its paint faded, its beams covered in lichen. Beyond it, he could see the faint outline of a lantern, its light flickering gently through the fog. He stepped closer. A sign hung crookedly from the gate post. It read, "Shukubo Kazanoan K's no in the Inn of Wind." The traveler bowed once, out of habit more than faith, and passed beneath the gate. The scent of pine resin deepened. The world beyond felt slower, as though time itself had paused to breathe. Inside the courtyard, he found silence so profound that even his thoughts seemed to move quietly. A monk stood beneath the eaves, his robe the color of ash, his face hidden by the shadow of a straw hat. He spoke without moving his lips. "You have come far." The traveler nodded. "I follow the sound of the bell." "Then you are close," the monk replied, "but not yet arrived." He gestured toward the inn. "Rest here. The pines will keep you." The traveler bowed again and entered the wooden hallway. The floor creaked softly beneath his feet, the scent of incense lingering in the air, cedar, sandalwood, and something faintly sweet, like memory. A single lantern burned at the far end, its flame steady despite the drafts of mountain air. He placed his staff beside the door, laid the letter on a low table, and sat down. Outside, the pines whispered endlessly. The sound rose and fell like a tide, ancient and kind. And through it all, the bell continued to toll, each note dissolving into mist, as if it were calling him not upward, but inward toward the place where waking fades into sleep. He closed his eyes. The sound of the bell became softer, then distant, then gone. And for a long moment, there was nothing, no sound, no thought, no time. Only the breath of the mountain, slow and deep, like the world itself dreaming. Chapter 1: The Inn at the Edge of the Forest. The traveler awoke to the sound of wind moving through paper screens. The room was dim, lit only by the pale gray of dawn filtering through the mist. He sat up slowly. The air was cool and still, and the faint scent of pine smoke lingered, a reminder of the fire that had warmed him through the night. For a moment, he did not know whether it was morning or a dream. The line between the two had long since blurred. Outside, he could hear the low rustle of trees, as though the forest itself were breathing. Each whisper carried something like a memory, a name, a sigh, a forgotten prayer. He rose and slid open the shoji door. The wooden hallway stretched into silence. The lanterns that had burned through the night were now extinguished, their smoke curling faintly upward like the tail end of a thought. He stepped into the corridor barefoot. The wood was cool beneath his feet, smooth from years of quiet passage. At the far end, a shadow moved, tall, robed, silent. It was the monk from the night before. The same straw hat. The same stillness, as though he were carved from the mountain itself. The traveler bowed deeply. "Good morning, master," he said. But the monk made no reply. Instead, he raised a finger to his lips, a gesture not of silence, but of listening. The traveler obeyed. They stood there together, the two of them, in the hush of dawn, listening. And slowly, he began to hear it beneath the sigh of wind, beneath the distant dripping of rain, a faint murmur, like countless voices speaking just beyond understanding. The sound seemed to come from the forest. Or perhaps from the stones. Or perhaps from within himself. The monk turned and began to walk. Without a word, the traveler followed. They passed through the inner garden, where a single pine stood at the center. Its roots coiled around a stone basin filled with clear water. Tiny ripples spread across its surface, though no wind touched it. The monk stopped. He knelt beside the basin and placed his hand just above the water, not touching it, but feeling its breath. The traveler knelt beside him. "What is it?" he whispered. The monk did not answer. He traced a circle in the air around the basin. Then, in the softest voice, barely more than a breath, he said, "Listen." The water began to tremble. Not from movement, but from sound. At first, the traveler thought it was raining. Then he realized it was voices. Countless, overlapping, rising, and falling like waves. Not loud, but deep, a chorus of memory. He could not make out words, but he could feel them: grief, gratitude, peace. Tears filled his eyes before he understood why. The monk turned to him then, and for the first time, the traveler saw his face. It was young, far younger than he had imagined, but the eyes were not the eyes of the living. They held no reflection, only depth, only stillness. The traveler's voice trembled. What are they saying?" The monk's lips moved soundlessly. But his voice came from somewhere else, not from the air, but from within the traveler's mind. "They are the voices of those who came before you. They rest beneath the roots of the mountain. The pines remember them." The traveler bowed his head. "I hear them. But why me?" The monk's gaze softened. "Because you listened." Outside, the wind rose through the pines, and the whole mountain seemed to exhale. The sound was no longer many voices, but one. A great, slow whisper, stretching through centuries. The monk stood. He gestured toward the garden gate, where mist was beginning to gather again. "There is a path," he said, his words like the faint toll of a bell. "It begins where the light ends." He began to fade. Not vanish, but dissolve, as if the mist had simply remembered him back into itself. The traveler reached out, but his hand touched only air. He stood alone now, the basin still trembling before him. The voices had quieted, leaving behind a silence so complete it hummed. He looked down at the water. His reflection wavered. For an instant, it was not his face he saw but another's. A face both familiar and forgotten. And then it was gone. The wind moved again through the corridor. The pine branches brushed the roof like fingertips, and somewhere beyond the fog, a bell began to ring. Once. Twice. 3 times. Each tone softer than the last, as if calling not to the ears, but to the soul. The traveler turned toward the sound. He picked up his staff, bowed once more to the silent inn, and stepped out into the mist. The forest awaited. Chapter 2: The Path of 100 Lanterns. Night had come again, though he had not noticed when the day faded. Mist gathered like breath along the path, softening the outlines of trees, stones, and graves. The traveler followed the faint sound of the bell, each note guiding him deeper into the forest, until he reached a slope lined with stone lanterns. There were many of them, 100, perhaps more, stretching into the distance like stars fallen to earth. Their flames were small, yet each burned with a different hue, some golden, some white, some blue like moonlight reflected on snow. As the traveler approached, he felt a warmth in the air, not from fire, but from memory. He bowed to the first lantern. Its flame flickered, and he thought he heard something, a whisper too soft to be language. He leaned closer. "Are you lost?" The voice was not outside him. It rose gently from within, like a forgotten echo of his own thought. He stepped back, startled. The flame steadied itself, glowing brighter for a moment before settling into calm again. He walked on. Each lantern seemed to speak in its own way, not with words, but with feeling. Some made him remember laughter. Others stirred sorrow he could not name. A few filled him with warmth so pure that tears came without cause. And through it all, the pines whispered above, their voices like the slow breathing of the mountain. At the 10th lantern, he stopped. It was smaller than the rest, its stone cracked, its flame dim and wavering. He knelt beside it, shielding the small light from the wind with his hands. As he did, a sound emerged, soft, fragile, and human. "Thank you." The words were faint, as if spoken by someone far away. He whispered back, not knowing why. "Who are you?" The light trembled. A name forgotten. A wish unfinished. A breath between two worlds. The traveler closed his eyes. He felt the warmth of the flame seep into his palms, and for a moment, he understood this was not the light of fire. It was the light of remembrance. He rose and continued along the path. The lanterns grew closer together, their light mingling, creating a golden fog that shimmered around him. He began to notice something strange with every step. The sound of his footfall became softer, as if the earth itself had turned to cloud. And with each lantern he passed, he felt lighter, as though the mountain were slowly removing the weight of his years. After the 50th lantern, the path narrowed. The forest leaned in closer, its branches forming an archway above. The air was thick with the scent of pine resin and rain-soaked earth. The traveler stopped. Ahead, a figure stood beside one of the lanterns, a young woman in white robes, her hair black as midnight. She was not solid, yet not entirely mist. Her form wavered gently, like the reflection of the moon in a pool of water. He bowed. "Are you the keeper of these lights?" he asked softly. The woman smiled faintly. "No one keeps them," she said. "They keep themselves." Her voice was music without sound, a vibration that seemed to touch the pine needles, the stones, the traveler's bones. Each light is a breath once given. When someone remembers, it burns. When forgotten, it fades. She looked toward the faintest flame at the far end of the path. Some lights have not been visited for 100 years. The traveler lowered his head. "Then perhaps I will remember them." The woman smiled again. That is all they ever ask. And with that, she dissolved into mist. The traveler walked on. The mist glowed around him now, alive with the shimmer of unseen presences. Voices brushed past him like wind through grass, laughter, songs, prayers whispered in languages long gone. He did not fear them. He listened. He breathed with them. He became one of them. By the time he reached the last lantern, the world had fallen utterly still. The final lantern stood alone at the edge of the cliff, its flame so faint it could barely be seen. He knelt and cupped it with both hands. The fire fluttered once, then twice, and finally grew steady. The traveler smiled. He did not know whose memory it was, nor did he need to. For in that moment, he understood each light, each breath, each step, was part of the same infinite silence. Behind him, the wind rose through the pines again, and the lanterns began to sway, their lights moving like stars caught in a slow tide. The sound was not mere wind now. It was a song, a hymn of gratitude, sung by those who had once been, for those who still are. The traveler stood, his shadow long against the mist. He bowed deeply, not to the mountain, but to the silence that held it. Then, without a word, he continued into the fog, following the path that led deeper still to where even the lanterns could no longer reach. Chapter 3: The Garden That Remembers Rain. The rain began before dawn. It did not fall in drops, but in whispers, fine threads of sound weaving through the air. The traveler had taken shelter beneath the eaves of an old temple. Its roof was tiled in gray stone, each tile darkening slowly as the mist turned to rain. He watched the garden before him, a sea of moss, soft and luminous in the dim light. The raindrops touched it gently, each one vanishing the instant it fell, as if absorbed not by the earth, but by memory itself. The temple grounds were utterly still. No monks, no voices, only the breathing of rain on wood and stone. He closed his eyes and listened. At first, he heard only the rhythm, soft, unhurried, eternal. Then, beneath it, something else. A voice, faint as wind through pine needles, speaking not to his ears, but to his heart. "Do you remember the rain?" He did not answer aloud. He simply breathed. The sound of water changed. It began to move not across the roof, but through him. He saw, in the reflection of the mossy pool before him, a world. Both familiar and distant, a small village at the foot of this very mountain, a road winding between rice fields, a boy carrying firewood beneath a paper umbrella. He knew that boy. He knew the shape of his hands, the rhythm of his steps, the quiet patience in his eyes. He was himself, a lifelong past, a breath forgotten. The rain in the memory fell harder now. The boy stopped beneath an old pine and looked up toward the mountain. Thunder murmured somewhere above the clouds. Then, faintly, a bell rang. The same bell. Its tone stretched across years, bridging what was and what is. The traveler's heart stirred. He understood now the rain was not weather. It was remembrance. When he opened his eyes again, he was still sitting in the garden. But the world had changed. The moss glowed faintly, lit from within by droplets that shimmered like tiny stars. Each held an image, faces, moments, the small tendernesses of forgotten lives. A child's laughter. An old man's prayer. A woman brushing dew from a leaf. He could feel them all as if they were breaths moving in and out through him. A soft sound broke the silence. Footsteps, barely audible, approaching from behind. He turned. A young novice stood there, barefoot, holding a bamboo broom. Her robe was soaked through, but her face was calm. She bowed deeply. "Forgive me," she said. "I did not mean to disturb your meditation." He smiled faintly. "You did not disturb me. You reminded me that I am still here." She tilted her head. "You hear the rain too, then?" "Yes," he said. "It speaks." The novice smiled, not surprised, but understanding. "They say the garden remembers every drop. It never forgets the sound of those who once stood here." She knelt beside him, her eyes reflecting the shimmering moss. When it rains, the mountain listens. When it stops, the mountain dreams. The traveler watched her quietly. Her voice, her presence, felt strangely familiar. He had seen her before, not in this life, perhaps, but somewhere in the long rain of memory. "Who are you?" he asked softly. The novice smiled again. "Someone who once forgot." She touched the surface of the pool with her fingertips. Ripples spread outward, and for a moment, her reflection changed. It was not the face of a young novice, but that of the woman in white who had stood among the lanterns. The traveler's breath caught. When he looked again, she was gone. Only the rain remained steady, endless, kind. He rose slowly, the sound of his movement blending with the rain. He bowed to the garden, to the moss, to the memory it held. The rain began to ease. The air grew brighter, filled with the scent of wet earth and cedar. And as the final drops fell, the traveler heard once more that low, distant bell. Not loud, but clear, like a heartbeat after a long silence. He took up his staff. The letter in his robe felt lighter now, as though part of it had already been read. He stepped beyond the temple gate. Behind him, the moss shimmered one last time, then darkened to green. Ahead, the path descended into mist. The rain had stopped, but its memory walked beside him. Chapter 4: The Pines That Speak of the Dead. Night returned with a gentleness that felt like memory. The forest was dark now, not with shadow, but with depth, as if the mountain had folded itself inward to dream. The traveler followed the path upward, his lantern dim in the mist. The air was cool, carrying the faint scent of wet earth and pine. Each step sank slightly into moss, soft as breath. Each sound he made was immediately swallowed by the night. Above him, the branches swayed in slow rhythm, their needles whispering to one another in a language older than time. He stopped to listen. At first, it was only the wind. Then, as his heartbeat slowed, the sound began to change. The rustling grew into murmurs, not words, not quite song, but something between. He closed his eyes. The voices rose and fell with the movement of the branches, each tone carrying a different weight: sorrow, tenderness, laughter, forgiveness. They were not frightening. They were familiar, like memories of people one once loved, dimmed by time, softened by kindness. A voice came clearer than the rest. A woman's voice, low and calm. "Do you walk still, little one?" The traveler opened his eyes. No one stood before him, but the pine nearest him seemed to lean closer, its bark glistening faintly with dew. He bowed his head. "Yes," he whispered, "I walk." "Then do not be afraid," the voice said. "The path remembers every step." He looked up. The branches swayed again, and within their motion, he saw faces, not sharply, but like images seen through rippling water. Some he recognized, some he did not. One face lingered longer than the others, a young man with kind eyes, smiling faintly as though amused by something small and tender. The traveler's breath caught. He knew that face. It was his own, not as he was, but as he once had been. The vision wavered, then merged with the motion of the pine, and was gone. The wind shifted. Now the whispers became clearer, rising and falling like the chanting of monks. Not in sorrow, but in gratitude. Rest. Remember. Return. He sank to his knees, the moss cool beneath his palms. He did not try to answer. He only listened. Each voice touched him briefly, then moved on as though blessing him before passing into silence again. From the corner of his vision, a faint light appeared, the glow of a small paper lantern, floating low to the ground. It drifted toward him, swaying with the breeze. He reached out. When his hand met it, the paper was cool and damp. Within it burned no flame, but a soft white shimmer like moonlight trapped in a shell. He could see shapes inside the glow, hands folded, a face bowed in prayer, a smile half remembered. He held it gently and whispered, "Who are you?" The light pulsed once, as if breathing. "A piece of you," it said. "The part that never spoke." The pine branches above shuddered with a long sigh. The entire forest seemed to lean closer, listening to the exchange. When the body rests, the voice continued, the pines remember. When the soul wanders, it keeps its echo. The traveler bowed his head. "I will remember them," he said softly. I will remember you." The light pulsed again, then dimmed. It drifted from his hands and rose slowly upward, vanishing among the dark branches. Silence followed a silence so deep it was almost sound. The traveler realized then that the voices had not ceased. They had simply become part of the wind itself. He sat for a long time, listening to that endless murmur, a symphony without beginning or end, woven from breath, rain, and time. And for the first time, he understood that the mountain was not a place of death. It was a place of memory, where nothing truly ended. He lay back on the moss, eyes open to the narrow strip of sky visible between the pines. The stars were faint, half hidden by drifting clouds, but he could see them move slowly, patiently, like the turning of thoughts in a sleeping mind. The sound of the forest wrapped around him, pine needles brushing one another, the hush of air through branches, the distant drip of water on stone. His eyelids grew heavy. The voices whispered once more. "Sleep is not forgetting. It is returning." He smiled. The world dimmed to gray. And the pines, still whispering, kept watch over him as he drifted into a sleep that felt older than life itself. Chapter 5: The Temple Where Time Sleeps. Dawn never came that morning. The sky remained a dim, endless blue, neither night nor day. The traveler awoke upon the moss, his body cold but untroubled. The pines stood still around him, their needles unmoving in the windless air. He rose, and the mountain was silent, so silent that even his breath seemed too loud. Ahead, half veiled by mist, stood a small temple. Its gate was low, its roof bowed with age, its walls covered in a thin layer of silver frost. He had never seen it before, yet it felt utterly familiar. He stepped through the gate. No sound of insects. No footsteps echoing. Only the faint hum of stillness. The courtyard was empty, save for a single stone basin filled with water. The surface was perfectly smooth, a mirror unbroken by even a ripple. He leaned over and gazed into it. But the face that looked back was not his. It was his shadow. Not darkness, but a reflection shaped like smoke, a version of himself that shimmered faintly, as if made of breath. The shadow spoke first. "You've walked far," it said. "Too far for one who does not seek an ending." The traveler bowed slightly. "I seek nothing," he said. "I only follow where the mountain leads." The shadow smiled faintly. "Then why carry the letter still?" He touched the inside of his robe. The paper was warm, though the air was cold. "I do not yet know who must receive it," he said. The shadow tilted its head. "Perhaps no one. Perhaps you have already given it." The traveler looked again into the basin. The reflection changed. Now he saw not one shadow, but many figures moving through mist, each one a version of himself, walking the same paths, kneeling at the same lanterns, listening to the same rain. "How many times?" he asked quietly. "As many as there are drops of rain," the shadow replied. "Each time you wake, the mountain breathes you back." He frowned. "Then what is this place?" The shadow's voice softened. "This is the pause between breaths. The stillness between heartbeats. Where time sleeps, and memory becomes form." The traveler sat beside the basin, his reflection folding into shadow beside him. He looked up at the temple's door. It was slightly open, darkness within glowing faintly like a hidden ember. He rose and stepped inside. The interior was empty, no statues, no candles, no signs of worship. Only a single tatami mat, and on it, a bell. The same bell whose tone had guided him from the start. He knelt before it. His fingers brushed its bronze surface, cool, smooth, alive with quiet vibration. The shadow entered behind him, its voice now a whisper near his ear. "This is where you end," it said. "And begin again." The traveler bowed. "Then let me ring it once more." He struck the bell gently. The sound boomed through the air low, deep, like the breath of the world itself. It spread outward, through walls and wood and stone, through pines and mist, through memory and dream. And as it rang, the stillness shifted. The walls dissolved. The roof faded into light. The floor became water, rippling outward into infinity. The traveler felt his body lighten, then fade. He looked to where his shadow had been, but it, too, was gone. Only his reflection remained, floating in the water's surface, calm, peaceful, unburdened. The bell's tone grew softer, fading slowly, until it became indistinguishable from silence. Then, from somewhere within that silence, a final whisper rose. "Now you may rest. Time will sleep, and you will dream the world anew." The traveler closed his eyes. The letter slipped from his hand, drifting down to the surface of the water. As it touched, its ink dissolved into light words scattering like fireflies across the stillness. Each spark rose upward, forming constellations in the blue air, spelling nothing, yet meaning everything. The temple, the forest, the mountain all became one single breath. And then there was only silence. Chapter 6: The Dream Beyond the Mountain. There was no sound at first. Only the feeling of stillness, a silence so deep it seemed to hum with unseen life. Then, from that silence, came a single breath. Soft. Endless. Kind. It was not his breath, and yet it was. It was the mountains, the skies, the breath of every pine and every drop of rain. He floated within it weightless, formless, a shimmer within a dream that had forgotten its dreamer. The light came next. Not the golden blaze of sunrise, but a pale, awakening glow that filled the space without direction. It touched him gently, not to awaken, but to remind. He remembered the path of lanterns. He remembered the rain upon moss. He remembered the whisper of pines. He remembered the bell. Each memory returned not as thought, but as warm, soft circles of light expanding through him. He was not seeing. He was being seen. He was not remembering. He was being remembered. Then he heard it, a voice, neither near nor far, speaking in the rhythm of waves. What you sought was never lost. What you carried was never weight. The journey was only the breathing of your own soul. The traveler, if he could still be called, that felt the words move through him like wind through reeds. He tried to speak, but his mouth, his tongue, his name all had dissolved into the vastness. So he answered not with words, but with quiet acceptance. And that was enough. The world shifted. The light deepened into gold. Shapes began to form, not solid, but hinted, like dreams deciding to become real. He saw a river winding through mist. He saw cherry blossoms falling in slow motion. He saw a village, a child, and a road leading somewhere beyond sight. And then, he felt something stir a pulse, a rhythm, a heartbeat. Not within him, but through him. Life, the silence whispered. It returns. He drifted downward, like a leaf finding water. The light dimmed, becoming morning mist. The air grew warmer, filled with the scent of soil and sun. He opened his eyes. He was lying in a field at the foot of the mountain. Dew glimmered on the grass. The world was quiet, except for the call of a distant bird. He sat up slowly. The mountain behind him was half hidden in cloud. For a long moment, he simply watched it breathe. He could not remember his name. He could not remember his past. And yet, he felt no loss. Only peace. Beside him lay a small folded paper, its surface blank, its edges damp with dew. He picked it up, held it to the rising sun, and smiled. The paper shimmered once, then dissolved into light, as if it had only ever been made of breath. He rose and began to walk. The path before him wound gently through fields of morning mist, toward the faint sound of a river. Each step felt new, as though the earth itself welcomed his return. The breeze moved through the grasses, whispering in the same rhythm as the pines. He listened. He smiled. He did not know where he was going. But that no longer mattered. Because he understood now there was no end to the road, only an endless unfolding of quiet beginnings. As the sun climbed higher, the mountain faded behind him, its peaks now golden in the light. Somewhere among those trees, the bell would still be ringing, not in sound, but in time itself. And the dream, gentle and eternal, would go on breathing, through every rain, every lantern, every pine that whispered to the wind. All things return, the mountain seemed to say. All things rest, and in resting, they begin again. He closed his eyes, felt the warmth of sunlight on his face, and took a single, peaceful breath. And in that breath, the world began anew.